I'm Yvette with J. Manning and Associates. This is part one of our 5-part special legislation series with Veghte. Let's dive into the latest on the Washington CARES Act.
Hi, this is Steve Kane, and if you've watched any of our videos or gone out to the blogs, you know we've talked about public long-term care programs, and I'm just excited to have a friend and a guy that knows more about this stuff than anybody join me for a few minutes. Ben Veghte from the Washington CARES Fund. Ben, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Great to be here, Steve, and I'm excited to talk with you and your listeners. My name is Ben Veghte. I'm director of the WA CARES Fund, which is the country's first universal public long-term care insurance program in Washington State. I have a background in public policy. My whole career I've worked in the public policy space, in academia, at think tanks, and now running the program here in Washington State.
That's great. So Ben, I know there were some changes recently. If you could give everybody just kind of an overview of the recent law that was passed in Washington.
Sure. It was a really important piece of legislation because it created the first supplemental private long-term care insurance market in the country. So kind of like Medicare supplemental, WA CARES supplemental coverage is going to be coverage that allows carriers to price and market policies that take the WA CARES fund as the deductible and extend WA CARES benefits, kind of like Medicare supplemental extends Medicare. And it will be, carriers could offer coverage that either a modest amount of additional coverage or a generous amount. The coverage amount can vary. It would be subject to underwriting, just like normal private long-term care insurance. It would be a normal private long-term care insurance product, except for having to meet the statutory framework, which has a few components. The main one is simply taking WA CARES as the deductible. And there's some other small elements in that legislation as well. So people who had opted out have the option now to rescind their exemption. A lot of people opted out, and about 500,000 people opted out, bought private insurance and opted out. Some of those people kept that coverage, some of those dropped it. If people had dropped their coverage in the meantime, they might want to join WA CARES now, and so it gives people that opportunity as well.
Have you guys had discussions with private long-term care insurance companies about, building products or riders that will meet those guidelines?
Absolutely. In fact, the legislation was the product of a collaborative process where 5 carriers were deeply involved over a year in developing the recommendations. It was a unanimous recommendation of a work group consisting of 5 carriers as well as consumer protection advocates in the AARP. So Pacific Life, New York Life, Lincoln, and Mutual of Omaha were all on that work group and recommended the framework. And carriers could either, in the future, the way they looked at this is they could take nationally marketed policies and add a rider to those policies so that they could fit the statutory frameworks of this supplemental market in Washington State, or they could choose to develop targeted policies just for this market. I think part of that consideration has to do with the fact that other states are also considering enacting programs like WA CARES, and so as this public long-term care insurance model spreads, it might make better economic sense for carriers to create policies that are specifically targeted at this market. But I think in the short term, you're probably going to see more policies that are nationally marketed that have a rider to meet the specific requirements of this.
Got it. And we'll talk about other states in a minute, but you've taught me a lot over the last few years about public policy and not only long-term care, but the political moving pieces and parts of a long-term care public program. And one thing that stuck with me is that, hey, you get something in there, it's not perfect, right? You're not solving for perfection, but you continue to make tweaks along the way. So when you look at the WA CARES program, is there anything else you want to fix? Or are you comfortable with it as it stands today?
Well, that's a great point, Steve, and I've learned a tremendous amount from you as well about the private market, so thank you for that. As you mentioned, the program has had significant issues at the beginning. The big items have all been fixed. Portability, there was no near retiree pathway. There were some other minor issues as well that were fixed. But going forward, there's no big issues remaining to be fixed. The biggest remaining challenge is that it's a low benefit amount. It's a modest premium for a modest benefit. But the supplemental market really addresses that remaining weakness by giving people who want more coverage the option to buy it on the private market, hopefully at a more affordable price point than they would have otherwise, because we're covering the first tranche of risk. There's always going to be room for improvement in the program. Part of it is gathering experience. Once we go live next summer, we'll have experience with people using their benefits, and we'll see what works well, what works less well, and if there are any additional tweaks that are needed to the program. But we're always looking for ideas. We have a commission that oversees the program, that listens to Washingtonians' feedback, and we have a feedback loop with the public that has led to a lot of the fixes we've had over the last few years.